Well, welcome everyone. I'm excited to introduce you to Friends of Figma Luxembourg, an official Figma community dedicated to bringing together designers, developers, and all creatives involved in the digital product journey. Our mission is to foster a collaborative environment where we can learn from one another through engaging workshops, remotely, in person, or hybrid. We also host watch parties for Figma new releases and updates to ensure that we stay at the forefront of the design innovation. Whether you are a professional or just starting out, our community is a place for everyone interested in design, and we believe that by sharing knowledge and experiences, we can all grow together. A little reminder that as this is an official Figma community, we have to follow the code of conduct that you might have seen on our website. So let's all be nice and friendly here. And don't forget that when you join us on in-person events, we always have some fantastic Figma swag for you. And we encourage you to stay tuned for future events.
Yeah, this is our volunteers.
Ekaterina?
So it's my turn now.
Yes.
I guess it's... So to create this community, I was inspired when I traveled to Barcelona, and I went to one offline event in Barcelona. It was very friendly community of professionals, and it was like professional spirit, and you can always ask advice, and you can always go there. And so I decided to create in Luxembourg this community, official Figma community, because we don't have it still. But the community already launched in all big cities in the world. So about me, in community, I'm advocate. I work as product designer in different fields. I started with gaming, then I moved to fintech, and currently I'm in entertainment, my last two jobs. I really like to do user research, interviews. I also like marketing design. It's like a rest for me to do marketing design, landing pages, what engage people to register or to buy something. I also like to explore Figma plugins, and my hobby is dancing, painting, and fashion. Jose?
Nice, thank you.
Monia.
Hi guys, so I recently joined the community too as event moderator, so we will have the opportunity to see each other during online but also in-person events that I will remind we have one on Thursday in Bazaar. I'm expert in everything that is fintech, economy and innovation, and I'm a researcher.
Thank you. Well, me, I'm a UX UI designer, currently working for CBTW Luxembourg. And some of the things I love doing is getting creative with prototypes, building design systems from the ground up, pushing the limits of auto layouts, and music, of course. I love to nerd about instruments, music composition, and all things related.
So, as just Jose mentioned before, we have in-person events, virtual events, and hybrid type of events. For example, Figma config watching party, when we all together watching conference. Virtual, it's like today, and in person, it's like on Thursday in Bazaar, for example. Networking for designers, so it could be masterclass, or it could be any event in person when we meet all together.
If you're interested in becoming part of the community, well, you're in luck because we recently are seeking for volunteers to join our team with these roles that you can see here. For example, speakers, relationship managers. That's going to be the person in charge of finding future speakers and organizing the events. Event moderators, social media managers, content creators, and venue managers.
Yes, and of course, we have benefits for our volunteers. You can look at the screen. It's free tickets for upcoming conferences in San Francisco and London. It's Figma Config and Schema created by Figma. And we have free subscription for Figma Pro. event supplies, including goodies, shipping from Figma main office in San Francisco. Also clothing for organizers with Figma branding, access to online and offline tools to organize events, and opportunity to be part of global Figma community. Also, we have special events for community organizers, including leadership trainings. And of course, it will be you experience as organizers. So if you would like to try to join us, you can send directly message to me or Jose.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, guys, I think if you're here tonight is to hear about Stéphanie Walter. We are very happy to have her with us tonight. Thank you, Stéphanie. It's a real honor. So you know her, she's a UX researcher and inclusive designer, very famous worldwide, I would say, very high-skilled person, and we are all learning from her, that's for sure. So she has like more than 11 years of experience in design, and she's a mobile expert. And why we wanted her here, apart that she's the best, is because we know that she values the community, and she always finds time to share her knowledge. She goes to conference, she does workshop, and she's like very active on social media. So Stéphanie, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks. Yeah, I need to share my slides. So thanks for having me while I'm preparing the screen sharing. Okay, cool. Hi everyone. I will not present myself again, and we'll dig right into topic. I want to talk about designing beyond the happy path. This talk was created because I still, even with tools like Figma, where we are actually designing in the browser, we are still as designers kind of like really focused in this pixel perfection best case scenario. And then we build our products, reality happens, real content, real users, different browsers, and a lot of things might go wrong and a lot of things that we didn't foresee happened. So my goal today is to kind of do a big round of all the small little detail that you might need to think about as a designer. And I have a treat for you. I've actually prepared a cheat sheet for that. I will put the link in the chat at the end. So the first thing we want to think about is designing beyond the perfect state. We kind of hope having something like that. Like, okay, the user clicks, the perfect page is loaded, we're done. That's unfortunately very rarely the case. Often we have mishaps, we have things that can backfire, things that do not work. So one of those is first, what happened while it's loading? Maybe user has a small connection. Maybe you have performance issues and your website takes forever to load. So in a perfect world, your website should be performant and should work very, very fast. But at some point, what can we do if we have very, very long loading status? So we can think about designing loading states. So think about designing what happens while the screen is getting loaded. So in my example on the left, I have this kind of skeleton screen where I try to load as much as possible. And then if it takes a lot of time, I still have a little loader at the in the middle, or I can have like a card with maybe a loader or skeleton screen, things like that. So what happens while this thing is loading is already like something we need to think about as a designer. Yeah, cute little loader from an actual product. So it's loaded. Actually, maybe not. It's like, has it loaded? Do we have errors or not? That's the first then branch. If we have an error, we might need to think about error states. So they try to load a page, but the page doesn't exist. So this is where you need to think about, okay, do I have this kind of 404 pages on all of those error messages? Like, how can I provide the user with something that is useful, but also maybe a little fun in certain cases? So this used to be the GitHub page. I haven't checked if it's still looking like that. But what I like about it is it's actually actionable. You have the cute little octopus 404. It's not too scary, but at the same time, you have a search bar, you have the logo, you have some links in here. So here, even if this page doesn't exist, the user has something to do. They have a next step in their process. They can try to find something else. So think about that. Like, if there's an error, what can user do? How can we help bring them to the next stage? And it's kind of the same at the component level. So here on my project, for example, what we have is like we have this very complex page where we have a lot of little boxes, and each box can load separately, which means that at some point we can have the whole page that is very nicely loaded, but one component has a problem. Unfortunately, in my case, there's not a lot of things that users can do. If we have a little box that doesn't load, is usually a technical problem. So the error message is not kind of the most perfect things, and I'm not a big fan of it, but we're like just saying, okay, there's a technical problem, reload the content, and if it's still not working, you can contact support. But here we still have kind of a strategy. It's like the user can reload, and then in case we have something else to do. So do we have content? Is the next question we might want to wonder. If we don't have content, maybe we can think about designing what happens with empty pages and empty stages. And here again, I think empty states is usually a design opportunity that we do not always take. On my left, I have the example of Doc Martens, and then like basically there's no search result for this page. What do? They give you things. They give you stuff to do again. They bring you to the next step. Shop women, shop men, shop kids, our bestsellers. So they use this kind of empty state, which is empty search result, to push content to you so that you do not leave the website, or just so that you know what you can do after that. This is as fun as it goes into corporate world. So I was working on a task manager tool, and actually the empty state is something good in a task manager tool. It means you're all caught up. You've done all your job. So here, the empty stage is kind of a reward, I would say. So instead of having nothing in there, we decided to have kind of a clean illustration design to say, yeah, you're all caught up. So kind of bring something positive and inform the user that, yeah, you do not have anything anymore. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bug. It's just you finished whatever you needed to do. And then empty states can also be an interesting place to help users when we speak about onboarding. So we have this feature where you can do a very complex search, and then you can save your search. Here again, if you've never saved any search, you do not have anything in the page. So what we did is like we used this empty state to have, again, a nice illustration and a way to teach the user and onboard them on this new feature that is my saved search. So if you do not have content, think about what can I do? Is there a design opportunity here to teach something to the user, to bring them to a next step in the process, in the flow, something like that? And how do we do that as designers? How do we make sure we do not forget about that? I don't have a perfect solution, but what works for my project is usually I have tons of checklists. If you've seen my website, I have tons of checklists online. So what we have is basically we have this kind of states listed in the design system at component level. And in the Jira ticket, we have this generic user story where we have all of those different states and stages so that when we write a story, we do not forget about that. So checklists, usually a very good tool if you want to avoid forgetting designing something. Okay, we have content. The page is loaded. That's good, right? We are here. The question then is, how much content do we have? Ideal situation is perfect, is usually what we design for. So here I have a card, and I work for a bank. We have contract, operation, counterparts, stuff like that. So what happened in here is this card is designed with an ideal number of items, 5 by default. Amazing. Most of the time, this is not going to happen. So I also need to think about what will happen when I have no content, empty state, or not enough content when I have only one. What do we do? Do we have the card shrink? Do we have it like a fixed height, but then there's empty space at the bottom? There's a lot of design solutions, and we need to take one and convey it to the developers. And then again, with your components, you have not enough content. Then you have the opposite. What happens when you have too much content? So here again, if in my card I don't have like 5 items, I have 20, what do we do? One design solution would be maybe to have pagination. Another design solution would be to say the stuff expands, like there's no height limits on the card. Another design solution would be to say, okay, we have a visual max height, and then we have horizontal scroll bars, something like that. All of those are perfectly valid design solution, but you need to convey it, and you need to kind of think about that in your design system. It's like, how is this going to expand? And if you have user-generated content, this is going to be the funniest, because you never really know in advance how much content your user will put in there. So as I said, I work at a bank, and some people will put a very small description for the project. Some people will put the whole Lord of the Ring in there. It's became a joke with the developers. So for a lot of the components, what we have is actually we have this kind of show more, show less mechanism. Wherever we know that a user might input content and there's no content limits in the input area, we know that most of the time it's like 200, 300 characters, but sometimes we have 1000 or something like that. So in this case, we're bringing this kind of show hide mechanism just to make sure that we can deal with too much content, not enough content, whatever they've decided to put in our database. So a couple of tips when designing for scaling content. My first tip would be ask the developers for the limits. Like if you design something, go to the developer, ask them, okay, what do you have in the database? What's the minimum amount? What's the maximum amount? And what's the average length? And make sure that you design for all three of those. If you're going to use fake content like lorem ipsum, for instance, because privacy, I work at a bank, so I'm not allowed to use real content. Still make sure that your fake content is close to the structure and length to the real one. So you can really have this kind of stress testing in your mockups. And then again, always prepare for more, especially if your user are going to input content. Someone will put a whole book in there, trust me. Okay, what about conditional content and scalable content then? Here again, what if I'm working for a cooking recipe website and I've designed a card in a way where I would like to have a picture and then a name, description, and then metadata? What happens if this is user-generated content, but my user didn't input an image? What can we do? We can say, okay, then we maybe have a logo instead, like the very nice cooking, which is supposed to be the logo of my website. Or maybe if there's no picture, then the card can expand, and then we adapt this to make sure that it works with the picture. So here again, this is the sort of decision that you will need to take when it comes to conditional content, scalable content. It's like if some user-generated content is missing, what do we do? Or is it mandatory? And then they cannot create a new cookie recipe without the image. That would be another solution, to not let users do that. But if you let them do it, you need to have a fail-safe for any missing content. And then we have this kind of very, very nitty-gritty thingy where a developer might ask, what happens when it gets bigger? For example, if I have my title that spans on 2 lines on my cooking recipe card, what do we do with the metadata? It's like from here, you see it's very perfectly aligned, perfect design case that never happens in real life. What happens if I have more content? This thing is going to grow bigger. Do I say, okay, this is going to align at the top of the container, and then whatever space we have at the bottom is whatever space? Or do we say, I want to align it in the middle vertically? Vertically. So we need to say, okay, it's the same space, top and bottom. Again, both design solutions work. It's just that at some point, you'll have someone who will ask you, what do we do with that when it expands? And we love our cards and we love our same height cards. In real life, of course, this never happens. In real life, you'll have real content. So what do you do with the height of the card? Do you say, okay, it's going to nicely hug this content? Or do you say we have a mean height? Something like that. So all of those kind of small design decisions you need to take. What happens if there's no value content yet? If you think about user flow, for instance, cooking recipe website, maybe I have this website where people can leave comments, where they can leave votes. What happens if there isn't any vote yet? We could say, okay, there's no vote, we do not have any stars. But it might be misleading. Someone who will see that very quickly might say, yeah, there's no stars because it's not good. Well, actually, there's 0 votes written, but still, if you scan the page, maybe this is not the ideal design solution. Maybe we want to say, okay, if we do not have enough votes, we do not want to bias users, so we do not display any stars. Or then we might say we want to display no rating available or nothing at all. All of those are product decisions. I would say this would be a case where I would do usability testing to decide what's the best here. But yeah, that's the kind of things. And then you answer the very business question of, okay, but how many stars do we need? How many ratings do we need so that we can start displaying an accurate vote? And that kind of like circles back into product decisions. But yeah, that's just a couple of examples. What I'm saying is like content scalability and conditional content is something very important. And I don't think you need to design all of those like I just showed you, but I think you need to decide what happens to this kind of content and then communicate it with the development team, because they will for sure come back to you and ask you the question, what do we do with that if this is missing? Something like that. So you might as well kind of try to foresee these sort of things. We talked about flexible content. We have something very, very cool in the browser today is more like flexible layouts. So usually, if you think about a component, you rarely design a component at one single size. If I'm going back to my cooking recipe example, I might have my kind of recipe cards in 3 different sizes, large and small. I use t-shirt sizing. You can use whatever naming convention you want. So usually, this is used for responsive web design to say, okay, we're using the small on mobile, the large on desktop, and then whatever comes in between will switch between medium and large depending on the screen size. That's something that we kind of got used to as designers in the last couple of years, designing like responsive pages that are able to adapt. The cool thing is we can also reuse these as responsive components or more like adaptive components. So if you think about my card, I can use it in a context of browser size, but I could also use it in a context of container size. We could say we have a sidebar, and in the sidebar, I will use the small version of the card. And in the middle of my content, I will use the bigger version of the content. So now we're not just designing for responsive, we're designing a system of reusable cards that can be dragged and dropped and used in different contexts and areas. And Figma is amazing for that because you can play on with variables, min, height, auto layout, all of that. So that's an example of the component that's actually built in Figma, where you can like play around, make it a little bit bigger, and at some point you're like, meh, that doesn't work anymore, so let's switch it to medium size. And then again, it's like, oh, I can stress test this a little bit, and maybe at this size is not perfect. I'm gonna switch it to the bigger version, something like that. So that's a really, really cool thing that we have those days. Like, it's not as close as it is in the browser, but with all the auto layout and variable, we can start kind of emulating this flexibility. So here my advice would be, we really need to stop our obsession over pixel perfection and kind of embrace this fluid, flexible nature of the web, of the support we are going to design for. And my advice is designing tool decide in the browser. Meaning, like, I'm not sure yet if this component would change at, I don't know, 380 or 400 pixels, something like that. But I will design a component and then I will like go with the developer team and we will stress test it in the browser and decide together when should we like switch the component actually in the browser. So I've been very technical. Let's kind of go back a little bit and remember that we're actually designing for users and our users are in different situations. The first kind of situation is user interaction. How is someone going to interact with what you've designed? And here is also an area where I'm still quite limited to that because we have this design tool where we are designing like non-interactive pixels, even though we start having prototyping and stuff. So it gets a little bit better. But this is something we need to think about. It's like most of the time we design the button, okay, that's nice, but stuff will happen to the button. Someone will hover it, someone will focus it using a keyboard navigation. You need an active state when you actually click on it. Same for inputs and stuff like that. So usually the different states for buttons and form elements is kind of covered in the design system. So that's a given. Like most designers are like, okay, kind of used to saying, okay, I need to think about all of the states, but still you need to communicate them to the developers. Interactive states, though, is something that might be a little bit more trickier. So if you have a single button, it's quite easy to convey what happens on hover. If you have a full drop-down menu, you need to tell the developer what will happen with it. What happens when the user hovers it? What happens when they click on the button and then it opens? What happens when the next thing opens? And all of that is only for mouse interaction. What happens when someone interacts with it with a keyboard? So now you need to design the whole thing and convey to the developer how will keyboard navigation work for that. So this is what I'm calling interactive flow, which is basically a very detailed version of every single interaction that will happen to this component that will work with mouse interaction, but also keyboard interaction. And then you can think about touch screens. It's like maybe you have some specific things about touch screens. For instance, you don't have hover on most mobile devices. If you have a design like that, so this is a reenactment of the portfolio of a friend of mine. I changed the icon, and they went, "Okay, I want to have only icon as a navigation." I was like, "Okay, but how do I know whatever this is?" And they were like, "But you just hover them, and then it says services, it says contacts." Like, that's fine, but what about someone only using touch interactions? Then they will never see your little hover effect. They will see it for half of a second, and they need to click on it. So that's something to take into consideration. Saying, okay, maybe some stuff work with desktop, but if it doesn't work on mobile, we need a design solution. So here, the easiest solution is to actually not hide the label and put it all the time. I know it's less fun than just the icons, but at least this is more inclusive and it will work in many situations and most interactive with most interactive devices, for instance. So how do you design for interaction? And what I usually advise people is think about your user flow, think about your interactive flow. It might be a little bit, it might take a little bit of time to document that to developer, but you are not going to design a new drop-down every day. You know, you design it once and then maybe you change the color, the content. But I think it's worth the time documenting how exactly the drop-down is going to work or your very complex component so that your developer understand how it's going to be interactive and how it's going to be implemented. Then let's talk about user preferences. So here again, we are bringing a new person in the mix. It's not the developer anymore, it's the actual users. So the first thing is user actually have preferences on their devices. For instance, some user might have a different zoom level. Either they have made the font of the mobile bigger or the font of the browser bigger. So here, the first thing to do is check with your developers that you actually respect the user zoom level. Otherwise, you will have accessibility issue and it will become very, very annoying. Another thing you can think about is color theme. We can have dark mode and we can have light mode. So here again, the cool thing in Firefox is you can choose, you can say, I want always light, I want always dark, or I want to follow the device theme. But it means that at some point, maybe if you want to support both, you might need to have your components in two different colors or color themes. So that could be quite interesting because some people prefer dark mode for some reason, and some people hate dark mode and prefer light mode for some other reasons. We can have a whole talk on accessibility of dark mode if you want after. But basically, my advice is make sure you follow user preferences whenever it's possible. Then there's another interesting user preference, which is reduce motion. So Motion, things that move around, can make some people sick. And here again, if you're like thinking about designing animation, you can communicate to the developer that they should maybe not turn off, but turn down some of the motion. So I hope the video is going to be okay for that. So I was making a fun demo where you have the stars in the background moving, and when I hover stuff, a lot of stuff is moving around. It might be triggering for some people. So when I switched to reduce motion, I completely removed the shooting stars because it was annoying. And I didn't completely remove the animation. I just have a smooth transition that is a fade in, fade out, instead of having this kind of motion sickness potentially triggering animation with the sun moving and all of that. So here is again, if the user says, I want less motion, it doesn't necessarily mean they do not want any. It just means that they want less triggering motion. So check with your developers what you can do about prefers reduce motion. And here again is the sort of situation where we would try to find users with vestibular disorder, for instance, and ask them to check if it's okay or if the motion is too much. So here, when it comes to user preferences, there's a lot of things that happen in the browser. So for me, this is where you want to do like design developer peer reviewing, where you want to really like design something and then fine tune the small little details directly with the development team in the browser. And then we can think about adapting to user's journey and user's environment. For instance, we can have offline supports on native application. We can also have offline supports on website that works pretty well. So I have two examples here. I have Sarah Sweden's blog, where you have a button that you can click to say, I want to put this page offline. And then if you've clicked the button before you come back in plane mode, or if you do not have any connection anymore, you can always check all the pages that you've put as offline support. The Financial Times Weekend, what they do is they will load in the background the whole edition of today. So all of today's articles are put into the cache of the browser for offline consumption. So this is something that we often forget, but like maybe we can bring some features, maybe we can bring some content that will still work even if the user doesn't have any connection. And then what happens if they have a connection, lose it, and get it back? Because why not? So here again, we are into kind of this niche area where we might need background synchronization, and you might need specific designs for that. So if you think about messaging application, for instance, or a mailbox, people start typing the email, they send it, it's then done. Okay, good, happy path. But what happens is if it doesn't synchronize, you may need this kind of synchronization failed status. What happens if the stuff is currently synchronizing? So now you need the status to say it is synchronizing. And what happens if we had a fail, it's synchronized, and it worked? Maybe you want to tell people it's successfully synchronized. So it's very specific and very niche, but at some point that might be useful, especially if you're doing like Messenger or any type of real-time collaboration, or if you're doing things around how do you call it, like document synchronization, images, stuff like that. This is when you want to think about, okay, what does the component look like while it's synchronizing, if we have an error, stuff like that. And then that's a real example, but that I redesigned to change the client. We can think about adapting the UI to the different step in a user journey as well. So here is basically a whole journey of bringing your car to the dealership while it's closed. And there's a whole thing about I don't remember, like yes, opening gates, putting the keys of the vehicle, signing signature, etc., etc. So here again, we could imagine that the interface is going to change and adapt basically based on what moment in the process you are. Are you 2 days before? Are you 1 day before? Are you 2 hours before this is going to happen? So there's a lot of, I think, missed opportunities, and this is kind of a stretch. But especially with AI, I think we can have like interfaces that adapt maybe a little bit more to the different like steps and processes of a user journey. So maybe we can like start exploring something like that. And to start exploring, adapting your user interface to the journey, there's no secret. You need to do your user research. You need to understand, okay, how will people actually interact and use my products in order to build something like that. So last thing we want to design for is beyond happy path and beyond our own assumptions and the assumptions of our teams. And I think that's sometimes the hardest because now we are dealing with the human factor, which is always a little bit tricky. So what am I thinking about? So on my screen, I have a tweet from someone who says, at a past job, I didn't catch that our system required 3 or more characters for at least a last name. I had to pull the backend engineers aside and go, so you know our new VPE's last name is Lee, L-I, right? So it's kind of a fun tweet to say, yeah, the guy had to remind his team about the name of the VP and basically saying, hey, you know, we couldn't even put the name of our VP in our system. So my question is, why did the team assume that they have that a name needs to have at least 3 characters? And I've worked on systems like that. I'm still working with a system where you cannot have less than 3 characters to share such a name currently on our tool. I have some people in the database with the last name M. M. That's it. 1 letter. I cannot search for those people because we assume a name has at least 3 characters. So there's tons of documentation on falsehoods, developer imagine about names, stuff like that. But that's kind of one of those assumptions, you know, you never know what will happen with someone's name. So make sure you do not have like false assumptions about names. My name is amazing for that as well. So here I was trying to have something delivered. I have first name Stéphanie with a E acute. And then I have these very nice error messages that basically blames me for having not the right name. It's like the information you entered cannot be processed. Please enter English only characters. English only characters. What does that even mean? So here again, someone assumed that all the names have English only characters, which is not the case. So this is what I'm going into, like our assumption. We need to make sure that we avoid assumptions, or that at least we have the right one. Otherwise, this is going to be a design disaster. And you might say, yeah, it's an edge case. I was like, okay, I cannot buy on our website, but Beyonce also cannot buy because she too has the E acute in her name. You want to sell stuff to Beyonce? Yes. So avoiding doing those sort of things. Another fun one, which is I was trying, so there's supposed to be a QR code, I just covered it in here. And it's basically, I'm supposed to scan a QR code from my phone, but I'm on my phone here. So since I cannot scan this QR code on my own phone, I can use the very, very long key under the QR code to authenticate. Problem is, they put user selected none in the CSS. So I took the screenshot with the console open to show the bug, but basically you have to imagine, I'm on Sony website. I try to do the 2-factor authentication. They tell me to scan a QR code. I was like, no, I'm already on my phone. I cannot use my phone to scan my own QR code. The second solution is to copy paste the key, except I cannot because you've disabled it in the CSS. So my question is like, how many bad assumptions led to deciding that you need to stop people from copy pasting the content of the website? And that's something I see often. It's like this, you might say, okay, it's an edge case, but still it's something that happens in real life. So if you are going to assume people need to not copy paste content on the website, you might as well have a very, very good reason. And honestly, I cannot see any. So again, bad assumption leading to me not being able to authenticate at all. And then the question is my default the right assumption to anyone? If you are on a weight tracker app and it says, congratulations, you lost 2 kilograms in the last month. Okay, that's nice if you're actually trying to track weight because you're losing weight. What if you're not? What if you're tracking weight because you're sick? And a weight loss means you're getting sicker. Do you want to congratulate the person about that? So here again, a design idea might be to ask the person what are they using the app for? Are they trying to gain weight? Are they trying to lose it? To make sure that if you're going to congratulate them, you actually congratulate them for something that is not going to trigger them at some point. So here again, we are like assuming everyone wants to lose weight, which might not be the right assumption. That's Cassie Evans, and she's talking on Twitter about what she calls this algorithmic memory. So she's basically explaining that every year, Spotify does the year in music, which is supposed to be nice and fun and all of that, except that one year she played the same song over and over again, and it was when her grandma was dying, and it's like, yeah, since that happened, she's not a really big fan of this kind of algorithm I hate that word, algorithmically generated memories. And again, most of the time people are happy about the song they listen to Spotify, but what if the song is going to trigger something bad, or if it's a picture of something you do not want to see? So ask yourself, okay, but might this cause harm or distress to users before bringing an actual feature? And can maybe people opt out of it if they need to? So how do we do that? This is way beyond UI. This is about challenging your assumptions, meaning you need to build more diverse teams, because you need to have people who have been in different situations and might be able to say, look, hold on a minute, what might go wrong? How are we building the right thing? Are we building it the proper way? Ask yourself, is this going to irritate or stress some users? I've basically kept Amazon notification just to have examples when I teach. So I don't know why in Luxembourg a couple of years ago, Amazon decided that I really needed Gummistiefeln, so this kind of rubbery boots. And they were like, hey, do you want the blue one? Hey, do you want the yellow one? Do you want the red one? I also had like pink and purple one at some point, I think. But basically, like, I've never bought clothes on Amazon. I don't know why Amazon wants to push this kind of stuff to me. I know it rains in Luxembourg, but like, come on. So basically, a normal user will not keep the notification. A regular user will be like, what the hell are those notifications? Thanks, no thanks, I will stop notification. And then you've lost your chance to notify the users. So if you're going to do something like notification, ask yourself, is it rightly timed? Is it going to annoy users? Is it going to bring them something? And then how might something get abused? So when I posted that on Telegram, when I posted that on social media, I had many people reach out. So basically what happens with Telegram is when you join, it will send, I don't know if they changed that since, but it was sending a message to all the contacts that you have in common to say, hey, that person joined Telegram. You say, oh, it's a nice way to keep in touch. Yeah, but it's also a nice way to abuse people. So as example, I had someone who said like, yeah, I had an ex stalking me. And when I saw this notification, it's basically meant, no, he knows I'm on Telegram, so I need to block him on Telegram as well. I had someone tell me I got abusive family member who keep trying to contact me, which means that no, the tool is telling me, hey, you can contact this person on this new platform. So again, might be nice to opt out, to have an option to say, please do not notify my contact once I'm in Telegram, because there's a couple of people I've blocked and I keep their number because I need to keep the number to block them. That's also very bad design pattern. But yeah, like basically ask yourself, how might this get abused and how might we prevent that? There's a couple of things that you can do. A friend of me, Debbie, has this whole article, I can put the link at the end, on what she calls bad actor brainstorming workshops, where you're basically putting a bunch of people in the room and you ask them to get nasty and you ask them to imagine how it's going to be abused. another very cool website is called Abusability Test Your Product. So database.platformabuse.org, which is a bunch of cards that tell you different bad actors and how they might abuse a specific product. So there's kind of always ways to try to predict that, but yeah, you need to take the time to actually think beyond this edge case, think beyond this happy path, and think of what might happen if something goes wrong. So yeah, at the end of the day, you need to deeply understand users and user behaviors. And when I say user, I mean all of them, not just the ones who look and act like you. Which means we need more diverse teams who seek to understand real user needs beyond this kind of happy path that we all imagine and then say, yeah, this will ever happen. This is an edge case. Because it's not. It will happen. And we're talking from state and content not loading as an edge case to potentially harming people with your native application or your website. So we need also more design and developer collaboration because we want to go beyond this kind of pixel perfect mockup that doesn't reflect real products and make sure that we have all of those cases covered when the product is going to reach the market. And that's basically what I have for you today. So I'm going to put it in the chats. So I've created this kind of, I don't know, flowchart framework that is a giant summary of everything I've covered today. From very technical UI, making sure you have your things covered with the states, with the error messages, with the content density, to building towards more like product strategy into making sure you design for user need, making sure you design with user interaction in mind, with user context in mind, and then do no harm and kind of higher level of product strategy. I think that summarizes it. So yeah, thank you for your attention, and we can check the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. That was amazing. I do think we had a question up there about from Lara. So she said, how do you document your edge cases beside the handoffs in the Figma file or somewhere else?
It depends. Often we document them in Jira when needed in the tickets because we're using Jira, but okay. So for components, I try to have different versions of the same components to show a little bit what might happen with different content density. Also, it's very easy to just have like one component and change the content with Figma now with all your variable and all of that. So I would do both a little bit in Figma to show to the developers and then Jira ticket to say, okay, what happens if we have too much content? Oh, by the way, this component has the show more, show less, something like that.
Lara, is that fine for you? I guess, yeah. Then we had another question from Ekaterina. How do you usually create adaptive components? Do you use any plugin to create them?
In Figma, no, you have the auto layout and all the features are already in there. So I haven't used any plugin for that in years. I don't think there's any plugin. If someone has a plugin, I'm curious though. But no, usually tons of auto layout and variants. And being smart about it, because at some point you might want to automate everything, but sometimes you're just, you know what, it's just easier to create a variant for a bigger version than to try to automatize all the layout and all of that. So the idea is we are in design, in Figma, we are not building the product. We are building a communication layout to build the actual product. So I would say the most efficient way is always the better.
Okay, then we have Alexandre asking, how do you manage the implementation of edge cases as they often end up in a Jira board as UX depth? That is never the PM priority.
It's never the PM. I bring data to a fight. So often, yeah, it's basically data. So I'm the voice of the users, and when there's a couple of users who will complain about something, and then I'm like, yeah, but it's not the edge case. It's actually happens. And then, of course, we have to have discussion about business value versus time and stuff like that. But I think I'm kind of lucky because I'm at a bank, so there's always a risk, you know. So I would weaponize that as well to say, yeah, but okay, but it's an edge case, but what's the risk when it happens? And for some of my edge case, where the PN was saying it's an edge case, I have a BA who comes, yeah, no, that's an operational risk. So bam, higher level priority. So yeah, it's usually big negotiation. I would say you need to check how many people, how annoying it is, what's the risk if it's not fixed. And usually, sadly, we live in a society where risk is like, you know, people work better with the stick than the carrot. So it's like making them understand how keeping that and how not fixing this edge case is going to be a risk. Operational, financial, social, whatever KPI your company is using at the moment, and try to tie that to the company values or company kind of financial or high level situation that can help you.
Okay. We got a question from Jose. How do you balance creativity with functional constraints?
Sorry, creativity?
Yes.
Functional constraints.
I would say that it's very creative to work in a bank when you have people who tell you you need to put 17 columns in a table, and you're like, yeah, but at the same time I have users who have like very small screens, like So yeah, for me, I work in enterprise UX, so the word creativity might have a very different meaning. I think for a lot of people, creativity is like doing artsy things that move around. It's like, I would argue that there's a lot of creativity into solving very complex problem and finding easy user-friendly solution to that as well. So hard question to answer because I think it depends on your definition of creativity.
All right. No, that's perfect. Thank you.
So I think time is up. Team, if I can have the last slide on our side, please.
Hi.
And Stéphanie, I see many positive comments. Thank you so much. Like, great presentation, amazing as usual, super
you.
interesting. Like, it was a real success, I guess. Thank you very much for being here. Thank
Super
you for taking
insightful.
the time. Here you have some links, guys. So the website, Instagram, and Facebook page for the Friends of Figma Luxembourg group. And don't forget, we do have an event this Thursday, 7 p.m. in Bazaar. We will have all the left side to do networking. So Stéphanie, you're very welcome to join. And all of you here tonight, thank you all. And hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, guys. See you soon.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.